morning, everyone. I'd like to talk to you today about freedom from fear. Right now, there's a whole lot of shaking going on, as that song that they sang years ago. But there's a way to be free from fear according to the scriptures. Today, the secret. What is the problem? The problem is misplaced love. Misplaced love. You'll see what I mean as we go along. If you turn to 1 John, the second chapter, verse 15, we're going to read 3 verses, 15 through 17. Verse 15 says, "Do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world," and it's going to mention 3 main things that it's talking about of the world. "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world." And here's the last part I want you to think about. I'll show you how temporary all that is. "And the world is passing away, and the lust of it." I used to preach a message, get in the lifeboat. Get away from those things. They're temporary. They cannot save you. They are just lusts to take you away from the Lord. Get into permanent, eternal things and live there. Live in the lifeboat with Jesus. "And the world is passing away and the lust of it." Now at the end it tells you what will not pass away. "But he who does the will of God abides forever." Think of that. He who does the will of God abides forever. During this current time, with this thing that's going on, this is a good thing to understand, that we need to get ourselves away from the things of the world, the things that we've placed our love in, because all that's going to bring us is more fear, more doubt, more confusion, and that's what it's meant to do. I like what Smith Wigglesworth says. "Live in heaven, walk on earth. Live in heaven, walk on earth." Interesting words. Very few. The wise always seem to be able to sum things up in a handful of words. But where are we living right now? Are we living in heaven and walking on earth? Because if we're living in heaven, we're abiding in the secret place of the Most High, under the shadow of the Almighty. There nothing can harm us. There is nothing so great to fear as fear itself. Fear can make you and drive you right into the problem itself, as we talked about in another message. John 15:19 says, "In the world, living in the world, but not being a part of it." Now what that reminds me of when I read that is living suspended. I want you to think about that. We can live in this world being no part of it, meaning living suspended. That way, the things that are occurring here will not move us. We will not be shaken, and we will not be moved. In 1 John 14, verse 17, it says, "Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment." So in this message, we're not learning just boldness and confidence here, but we're talking about in the day of judgment, when we appear before the Lord, having boldness then. And then it tells us why. Because as He is, so are we in this world. Boldness in the day of judgment. Because as He is, so are we in this world. we live in this world as He. He lived in the world, but was no part of the world. When we live in this world, we must learn to live in this world and not be a part of it. That's living suspended from the world, living in the secret place of the Most High, just like we heard in the scriptures in Psalm 91:1. He who abides in the secret place of the Most High abides under the shadow of the Almighty. Verse 18 of this, which is the next verse in 1 John 4, says, there is no fear in love. We see cars with no fear written on them. We see people running all over the place with no fear written on their shirts. We see it on the internet. But many of those people are so loaded with fear, they can't hardly think straight. And this didn't help any, this current problem. But the Bible tells us exactly how to have no fear. And the word is true. It says in verse 18, there is no fear in love. Now we're not talking about worldly loves. We're talking about agape love, God love. There is no fear in love. But a perfect love, it says, casts out fear. Here is the secret to living your life here on earth without fear during the current times that we're living in. What is a perfect love? Thought you'd never ask. What is a perfect love? It tells us in the scriptures what a perfect love is. A man went up to Jesus in the scriptures, found in Matthew, the 22nd chapter, and we're going to zero in, on verse 36. And he asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment of all? And here's what Jesus told him. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. The love of God, as the song says, is greater far than tongue or pen could ever tell. It reaches to the highest star and to the lowest hell. The love of God is the answer to fear. If we will perfect love in God, having a perfect love casts out all fear. There will be no room for fear because a perfect love will not give it room. What is a perfect love? Oh, it's pretty simple. We know how to love, don't we? We begin by saying, I love you, Lord, more than mother, more than father, more than lands, more than brethren. We have to love God more than all of these things, wives or husbands. A perfect love is what casts out all fear. When we love other things more than God, then we give room for fear to come in. Let's don't give fear room. Let's put God where he belongs. When Smith Wigglesworth would get up in the morning, he said he would start lifting his hands and praising the Lord on the way out of bed and singing. And he said I would do dancing to him for 10, 15 minutes. And he said, I don't mean just little dancing. I mean high-speed dancing, he said, and lifting the Lord up in love in the morning. Through the day, he would meditate on his word. The Lord told David in the Bible, seek my face. And David said, your face, Lord, I will seek. David was called a man after God's own heart. Don't you want to be called that? A man or a woman after God's own heart, living in the secret place of the Most High, covered by the love of God? There is no room for fear in a perfect love. This gives fear no room. It has to flee. Just like when you go into a dark room and you turn a light on, the darkness has to run because of the power of the light. So does the fear have to flee because of the love of God. God bless you.